Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Friday, October 28th, 2022. I'm Jer Stays, and as he does every week, across the table from me is...
Devin O'Reilly. Not always across the table, but I got a streak going, so...
Let's keep the streak going, right?
Good to be here in
fun
person.
To see. Yeah, it's far funner to see you in person than to be connected virtually,
I agree.
if you will. Well, not only is it National Chocolate Day and National Champagne Day, I went and looked up all these things, Devin. I saw the face that you made at me across the table. I was like...
That's a lot of big stuff we're putting in a national day here. We got chocolate and champagne, and you're still going to go further. What else do we got?
There's so many other days, but I would say that it would be nice to have a National Daily Detroit Day, but I'm not sure how to make that happen.
313 Day?
Doesn't that already exist?
Yeah, but we can get a piggyback on that.
Why not
We'll talk
piggyback?
to Jeanette Pierce. She can bless that.
Do we just look for Jeanette's blessing on things at this point?
Yes.
St. Pierce?
Mm-hmm. St. Pierce. She's basically, I just picture her as one of the ladies in the Detroit flag. She's one of those people now.
That was a Halloween costume of hers one year.
Did
you know that?
I didn't know that, but it makes total sense.
Anyway, what are you drinking?
Well, Jerry, I stopped at a place that I had not been to before, which obviously is rare for me, but Cafe Alto. I don't know if that rings a bell for a lot of people, but it's on Woodward Avenue. I thought it had become a real estate office, but it is now a coffee shop. And it was a coffee shop before. Do you remind me of the name?
New Order.
New Order, that's right.
Because I always used to think that an ice cream shop should open up next door called Depeche a la Mode.
Okay, you're getting a little... Yeah, that's a little like
this is how I remember
elder
things.
Millennial jokes here, but all right, I'll take it.
The real estate agency, I think, is in the back because we interviewed them on the show a while ago.
It's an interesting setup. The New Order was famous for the cereal milk lattes, if you recall that. But it's right there on Woodward, and it's basically it's kind of just the front end. It's got some outdoor seating. It's got a walk-up window. It's got your coffee. It's good. It fits the bill, fits the purpose. So I grabbed that on the way over, and it was great. What did you have?
Well, I also tried somewhere new that I have not been. I had a meeting, and so I tried out the Coffee Lounge in downtown Wyandotte.
Interesting. So a little bit downriver.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got listeners in Wyandotte that love the show, and they've asked me many a time to be like, hey, come on down, do this thing. So why not? It's a great
Why not Wyandotte?
You know what? Just put it on the sign, right? It's a great little joint that's kind of like in a triangle-shaped storefront. Those are kind of awkward and odd, but I love them for this kind of thing, right? It's in an old building. You know, real solid. Had an iced latte because I'm a glutton for punishment even in the fall. Like, it's got to be really cold for me to drink hot coffee.
Well, yeah, you're just regulating that body temp there, Jared. An iced latte now in the fall, I think is still acceptable. But now once we get into like November and December, I'm going to have to disallow that.
And if you're into that sort of thing, they have palm readings available on occasion.
That's an interesting play for a coffee shop, but I guess it kind of makes sense. It reminds me of like the old school coffee shops in like the 90s that used to be very like eclectic and smelled of incense.
Oh, I'm the geriatric millennial. I'm all about it. I'm all about it. Elder, whatever you want. I have so many good memories of coffee shops like that. So solid product, of course. I always like to highlight these little bits. And I know that from listeners, we've had some requests to go out and visit different cities. And I think that's something that we're going to do. I'm hoping to find a sponsor for it, actually, because that would be really nice because it would take a lot of work. But go out and, talk to people who live in those communities. Not just like maybe we'll talk to a mayor or somebody, but really I want to talk to people who live in a community, whether it's a City of Detroit neighborhood or a suburb or a neighborhood in a suburb. I want to hear about where you're living from your perspective. So why don't you hit us up, dailydetroit@gmail.com. I've got a couple of cities already on the list from listeners, but if it's something that you'd like us to come out and do, we'll meet you up at a spot, like bring the recorder, and I want to hear the stories about your town and why you live there.
Love the idea, Jared. Can't wait to get into this. As we talk about, you and I dig into Detroit as well as anybody, but I have my kind of Dearborn aficionado hat. You've got your East Side aficionado hat that you can put on, but it's outside of that, we're still looking to explore other places.
Oh, of course. And contributors too. That's always important. I always want to know what's happening across the region because we really are a regional show. Our listenership is regional. It's definitely something that we want to do. Where have you been?
Well, Jer, it's interesting to kind of say it this way because I kind of went back to my old life recently, this past weekend. My wife and I had a little bit of a belated anniversary.
I'm glad the wife's still
dinner.
When you say I'm going back to my old life,
No.
My friends at this age, being a geriatric millennial, they tell me about their divorces.
Well, no such thing, Jared. But when we were hanging out downtown and both living downtown, we were just boyfriend and girlfriend at that time. So we took a step back in that regard. And we had a little belated anniversary dinner at San Morello on a Saturday night, which we don't really find ourselves downtown, especially with the baby now. We don't usually find ourselves downtown on a Saturday night anymore. And let me tell you, It was lively, quite a scene, a very diverse scene, I might add. Just tons of people out and about. It was loud, but I loved it. I mean,
Cities are supposed to be loud.
for those who have been listening for a while, you may know I literally lived above the Nike store at one point on Woodward Avenue. I mean, it was loud as loud can be. I couldn't do that now. I wouldn't get any sleep, but I loved it back then, the sounds of the city. So we sat outside at San Morello. We got all the sounds of the city we could handle, kind of walked around our old area where we lived. It was really, really nice, really, really nostalgic to do that. It was a beautiful night too, last weekend. So that was really nice. And then we kind of night capped, as it were, at Sugar House, which, I hadn't been in like 4 years. Sugar House was the original speakeasy that brought in that whole wave of craft cocktails in Detroit. And I'll tell you what, they haven't lost a step. There's over 100 drinks on the menu, and had a few of them, and they still do really well, and they still do great business.
I remember going to Sugar House before it was cool, back in the day, before it really hit all of like the big magazines and whatever. And I'm just glad to see their success, even though I don't go there as much because I don't do lines anymore.
Well, yeah, you know what? What's funny, Jared? We just actually ended up walking in. We got a seat at the bar.
That's awesome.
Forgot they have a really long bar, and that's still first come, first serve. So we were able to grab a quick drink.
Well, and they've been the genesis of so much great cocktail talent. Like, you can draw a straight line with, say, Yanni, who is over at Bad Luck Lounge. I remember him trying cocktails like at the bar on a Wednesday night, experiments that he would do. And now he's running Bad Luck, which is in like a speakeasy kind of in an alley near Capitol Park. So like you see all these things, there's connections.
Right. It's like in the sports analogy, like a coaching tree where you've got, there's one coach and then all these assistants that come out of that coaching tree go off to their own successes. That's exactly what happened with Sugar House. It spawned so many different bar managers and so many different cocktail gurus in Detroit. It really was that genesis point for that in Detroit. So it was really cool to kind of go back to that and remind ourselves of what it was like. And like I said, it hasn't changed. And I mean that in a good way.
Let's get into the news. I wanted to bring this one up real quick because you are kind of attached to the whole entrepreneurship mobility space in the things that you do. The news is that both Ford and Volkswagen pulled the plug on Argo AI, which is a company that kind of was working on self-driving vehicles. It was a joint venture. They were saying that they don't see a path forward when it comes to consumers. Ford is writing off $500 million in cash and $2.7 billion in total of like different, it's basically a large write down. It's part of why they lost money this quarter. What's going on?
What's going on is a good starting point for this, because I think a lot of people's first reactions is, what does this mean? Like, what am I supposed to take away from this story?
Right, because consumers might not know the brand Argo AI.
What does that even mean? And we talked a little bit off air, and I kind of want to start a little bit by saying, basically, for the last 5 years, the industry as a whole has been blowing smoke up its own ass, basically. And just autonomous driving. And we're talking about 5 levels, so we need a quick level set here. 5 levels.
Literally.
5 levels of autonomous driving. One being like the basic driver assist stuff that almost all new cars have, all the way up to level 5, which is you don't even have a steering wheel, you don't even need windows, your car just drives you and does everything for you. So basically, we're somewhere in between there. A lot of the stuff you see with like the new Cadillac models, BMWs, things like that, those are like level 2, some border on level 3 now. So just to give you an idea where we're at, level 4 and level 5 are something that has always been, a strive to be, because that means you're not even touching the steering wheel. You don't need a steering wheel.
4 and 5 is when you get in the car, open up your book, start reading, and it takes you to work.
And legally can do that.
Right, legally.
It's past the regulatory things. Then no car can do that. Now let's be clear. No car can do that currently. The problem was 5 years ago, people were telling us in this industry and outside of the industry was telling us, oh, we're 5 years away. We're 10 years away max from getting there. This was 5 years ago. And there was a lot of hubris. And at some point we realized we're not even close, Jared. We are so much farther back than we realized we were, that all these companies now have really cut the AV and doubled down on EV, which is, electric vehicles. That's more real. We're there now. We've got fully electric vehicles. We're mass adopting those. They've really poured their dollars into EV and really cut the autonomous vehicle stuff.
It's part of the reason why you're seeing more EV development, because that shift has been happening quietly over a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's been happening quietly, and a lot of it is the regulatory stuff. You ask an average person, do you think it's going to be easy to fully adopt autonomous vehicles onto the roads? Anyone could say, of course it's not going to be easy, because how are you ever going to mitigate the people who are driving regular cars and AV cars? They're not talking to each other. It was never something that was really going to work. Now, the only applications that exist in our current state for autonomous vehicles are industrial trucking, you can do some of that. You can do like different shuttles. There's autonomous shuttles for things.
Closed loop, one direction,
Exactly.
same path every time. Like I could see a future where some sorts of mass transit are kind of automated to an extent or partially automated because you're on a trek or you're in a protected area or you're doing the same thing every time. But a lot of these autonomous vehicles, I would see videos and things and lots of promise out in the middle of the desert somewhere, and then you put them in winter, or you see them having to scan a stop sign that's more than 1/3 covered with like leaves, and they were screwed.
Exactly. And speaking of out in the middle of the desert, where they build a lot of this type of car, I have to point out, though, when you think of autonomous vehicles and even electric vehicles, the number one company that you think of is Tesla, right? And Elon Musk, of course, is the very well-known owner in that company. And, he bears some responsibility for some of this smoke blowing because he's been talking for years now about how level 4 and level 5 autonomy was just around the corner, just the next update, just the next Tesla model. And we've been hearing this now for, God, Jared, almost 10 years. And I'm going to tell you something, and I hope, listeners, trust me, Tesla is not any farther along than GM or Ford. So this isn't like, oh, yeah, look, Ford sucks, and, they're no Tesla. Tesla's no Tesla in that regard. They're not even close to level 4 and 5, truly.
I have seen the posts from friends on Facebook. They're like, I bought the autopilot package, and basically they did not have great experiences with it. And it isn't where that they promised it to be. And the other issue is the regulatory point of view. And yeah, one can say that we need to have less regulation for lots of things. And generally, I'll agree with it. Like, I am somebody who thinks most sign ordinances are kind of crazy because there's lots of signs you can't do without 50 steps, right? But when it comes to vehicles, you can't sidestep that. You're dealing with life and death. You're dealing with people's kids. You're dealing with people's family. There's a reason why vehicles are this regulated, and there's a whole history. Like, if you want to dive into it, you can actually look into the whole history of why these regulations happened, and it happened over a series of 100+ years for a reason. It's for safety and for consistency.
Yeah. So suffice to say, Jer, unfortunately for anyone who was getting ready to hop in an autonomous vehicle in the next few years, unfortunately, it's not going to happen unless you're getting some kind of closed loop taxi to maybe an airport or something.
Do you think that it's kind of out the door for, say, this generation?
Our generation, Jared?
Our generation. Like, do you think that we would have something closer to true autonomy by the time I retire?
Yes. Give it long enough, innovation does find a way. I just think we were in a point 5 years ago where it was just around the corner. And now we have to admit that it's not something that our generation is going to mass adopt. It's going to be something that Gen Z basically is going to mass adopt. And so we're talking, 10, 20 years.
Fresh in the inbox, chili, mustard, onions. America's first vegan Coney Island will be no more in December. It's in multiple news outlets as well as a social media post from the owner. In that post, they share that it looks like they're going to do some sort of pivot to retail and packaged goods, which my gut says is kind of a good thing in general. Devin, any thoughts after reading all the coverage?
Yeah, a few things. I mean, first of all, I do appreciate the owner did seem pretty honest and candid in the interviews, and he didn't just blame the pandemic. He didn't just blame business. He said business was fine in general. He was doing fine. He's not closing because no one's going there anymore. But admittedly, products are more expensive, especially vegan products. It's a different level of product. You can't really go super cheap on that type of stuff. So ingredients were more expensive, and staffing, was an issue. He was pretty candid about those being part of the reasons, and burnout. It seems like there was a little bit of burnout there, which we've talked about all the time, but it always bears repeating. The hospitality, the bar and restaurant industry is just a grind. Whether you're an owner, a manager, a server, it is a grind.
Hats off to anyone who's going to run a restaurant.
Yeah.
It's a hard job. The space on Brush Street in Brush Park is up for sale it's actually the business is up for sale for $625,000 if something you want to get into. I mean, it was featured by Al Roker, like on national television. Like, all those things are great, but at some point, it's hard to make a lot of these things go. And, I know there's a lot of hype around vegan restaurants, and I appreciate people who make those choices, but it's also not a huge group of the population to serve in reality.
No, it's really not. And especially with the Coney model, I think that there was a little bit of cognitive disconnect there because I went there several times. And although it was very good, but when you're trying to replicate something like a Coney and like chili cheese fries and that type of stuff, and like the Thousand Island dressing and Big Macs, which is all stuff they were trying to replicate, you cannot replicate that texture, that mouthfeel, that flavor. It's just not there. So although it was good, there was no way I would close my eyes and be like, oh, this is a Lafayette or American Coney. No, it just wasn't there.
You know, the owner is going to be doing consulting and things like that. I think there's a lot of lessons that I'm sure that he's learned that would be valuable. And although it sucks for people who are fans of it, I'm not going to look at this as necessarily a total loss. But restaurants, they're hard to run. They often don't last very long. So this is pretty long as far as things go. And, maybe it's a good lesson learned in a new chapter for Pete. Earlier this week, we talked to Cheyenne Noserini about the Monroe Midway that's going in on the Monroe blocks, kind of the arcade and all that stuff. Well, there's another thing. The downtown Detroit winter markets are back. They're going to start on November 10th. This is something I wasn't sure what was going to happen a few days ago, and getting all this info like, oh, now this is more familiar. This is what's going on. And Devin, they've made some improvements over time to this whole market concept in Cadillac Square and such.
Yeah, the infrastructure on this is great. The first year they did this, it was a little bit here and there. They didn't put a lot of effort into it. They wanted to see how it went, and I think people didn't know it was there. And so they've now been doing it for a few years, and they've really built up the notoriety that these are really cool. It's a really good way to support small business, and they've invested more in the infrastructure. So whereas the first kind of iteration of these were flimsy-ish glass igloos.
I remember them.
They were almost repurposed. They weren't supposed to be like, there's kind of flimsy glass cubes there. Now it's a much more, almost like a shipping container level of like metallic with a hard roof and a secure door.
Far more insulated, by the way.
Exactly. That's what I'm
Far
getting
more
at.
insulated.
That's what I'm getting at. The original winter markets were very cold. You had to wear your winter jacket even inside. This one, it looks like it'll carry some warmth a little bit more.
And it's been 5 years. I want to mention that. They've learned some lessons, and they've said that they've done more than 130 small businesses and nearly $6 million in sales. This year, there'll also be the Cadillac Lodge, although no booze this time again. That's been
I don't like it.
City of Detroit licensing is a special beast, my friend.
After COVID, they should have learned their lesson. You got to be a little more lax. Remember we were talking about regulations earlier, Jer?
There we go.
Deregulate booze.
Well, that means we won't get a sponsor from the distillery company or from the distribution companies.
No, will from the distillery companies.
We will from the distillery companies. In fact, email me, dailydetroit@gmail.com. We can use it. Anyway, the vendors include 3 dogs, 1 cat, which I have shopped at myself for studio dog Gabby, Elcott's Attic, Cookette, Decreated Boutique, which is something that Cheyenne is a big fan of. She had a kid when they were doing stuff before. They took a little bit of a hiatus. They're going to be back, and she's got a kid just right in the range again.
There you go. Perfect.
Cheyenne's going to keep her in business.
I'll have to check that out for mine.
Estella's Vegan Dessert Boutique. There you go. Little boutique thing. Flamingo Vintage, Haley & Company, Encourage, Jonna K, Love Travels Imports, Munger's Provisions, which been on the show before.
Great cheese.
Oh, yeah. I've bought some for some stuff. Not Sorry Goods, Opal Grove Games, Well Done Goods. It keeps going and going and going.
There's
and going
a lot
and going.
here. There's a lot of
I
small
thought I'd
businesses
read
for
it off and I'd be like 5, and then I got halfway through the list and I was like, oh, God, I'm screwed.
A lot of small businesses to support. Small Business Saturday is coming up next month, so this is a great way to continue to support.
Well, and it's good to be able to go downtown and you can really make a day of it. Like do a bit of shopping, check some like brick and mortar businesses that are there, get a little bit of dinner somewhere. It's a great kind of all together, experience. You're going to have the rink soon. Oh my gosh, it's almost rink time.
It is almost, I passed by
Devin.
today. They're putting up the rink. The rink
Really?
is going up as we speak.
Oh my gosh. Time just goes faster, man.
Indeed it does.
Well, and one thing before I forget, Devin, you're back podcasting somewhere else. You're cheating on us, Devin.
No. You're always my first love. I guess that doesn't mean I'm not cheating. You're just my first love. I'm recording some more episodes of Detroiters Think Big, which is the podcast I do for the Detroit Regional Chamber. We talk to small businesses in Detroit, some really cool people. Shout out to Kari Frazier and Detroit is Different. I was over there. He actually let us use his podcast studio, which is a really cool place on Clements in Detroit. So he's got a really cool setup there. And we just talked about kind of content creation and how, it's not easy and it's not quick. And if you want to do it right, it can't just be something that you do a couple hours every week. You got to really be dedicated to this stuff.
Oh, 100%. Kari is a longtime friend of the show. I've known Kari for many years behind the scenes. Something that hit me when I was in Memphis last weekend talking to some folks. People didn't realize that this is a full-time job for me to
Did
put
it
this show
think you were
together.
like a stockbroker or something? Maybe not in Detroit. I don't know what they thought you did.
Right. Like I had some sort
Works
of
in
very
they
bland.
probably thought you worked in an auto company, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, like a side project, and like I worked in the foundry or something.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. But it was something that I realized that I need to communicate that a little bit better. And we make sure to use the Patreon to help support the people who work on the show. Like, it's a side thing for you, but, everyone gets something out of it. And it's important to share that. I realized I needed to do that because we are more than 1,000 episodes into this thing.
We are.
And so your support would be really crucial to help grow it. I think that this is the future of media. We've been able to prove it out with being here, the newsletter that's been growing leaps and bounds. Thousands of people get that newsletter. And frankly, we haven't gotten any huge outside investment. There is no Dan Gilbert, Daddy Warbucks. Remember TBD magazine back in the day and all the money?
Oh God, yes.
I can recite a whole series of magazines that
a
have come and
massive
go
failure.
with all kinds of like investment from different people, and they came and then they went away. And Daily Detroit's been here for a while, for more than 1,000 episodes, and we've got the newsletter too. So between those two things, that's basically my full-time job. I do a little bit of work for Detroit Public Television here and there, but it is something that if you want this to go, and we have big plans, there's a few different ways you can help. You can become a sponsor, like our friends at your Metro Detroit Edward Jones Financial Advisors. It's been absolutely wonderful and helped us get to Memphis. Our Patreon is important. That's our membership, patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Or if just a one-time thing, buymeacoffee.com/Daily Detroit. Anything you do, if you can do it, can really help because we have a big vision for 2023. We're kind of out of the shadow of the pandemic right now, for all intents and purposes. It's medically still there, but things are moving forward. And so we want to do some big things, and it'd be great if you joined us.
I would love to have more people involved, especially supporters, listeners, whatever, contributors. Hell, Jared, we would love to talk to more people. Like you said, we're looking to grow in various ways and come along for the ride.
Absolutely. All right, Devin O'Reilly, so good to see you.
Great to see you, Jer.
With that, I'm Jer Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.